I'm John Levy. I'm a human behavioral scientist and major comic book fan. And today I'm joined by Dr. Moran Cerf from Kellogg School of Management and runs a lab across MIT, Kellogg, and NYU. And we're going to be exploring the science of superheroes, specifically science fiction turned into science fact. Over the past decades, we've seen the concept of cybernetics and robotics across film and comic book. But how realistic is it? And what is it that's going on right now in the industry? Moran, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, I'm super excited to have you here, not only because of your involvement across a ton of media. First of all, you're a neuroscientist, right?
I am.
And you have a lab at Kellogg, and you study, what is it that you focus on?
So we're looking at a lot of cool stuff in the brain. The coolest things we're looking at right now is ways to look inside people's dreams and extract the content and change their dreams, and also ways to enhance and augment the human experience of life, which I'm going to explain in a second.
And your expertise has been used for a ton of popular culture and movies and television, right? What have you worked on?
So there's a TV series that you may have heard of called Falling Water, about the ability to look at people's dreams and change them. That's informed by our research. There's a show that you may have heard of called Mr. Robot, about life of hackers, that also has something to do with our work. There's a number of shows that you may know about called House, and they're also inspired by some of the work we've been doing. And it goes on with shows like Limitless, and recently a show called Bull, and a number of shows that you may know that run right now.
And you got your career start in a very interesting way. You're ex-military, is that right?
Yes, so I started not as a scientist. When I was a kid, roughly the age of many of the people in this room, I really loved computers. And I did not imagine that loving computers could actually make you money as an adult, but turns out it can, because I started playing games like Mario and King Kong that you may have known if you looked at arcade games from the 80s, and trying to find ways to add a life to Mario or get advanced in one level in Donkey Kong. And this skill turns out to be really useful if you later on become a hacker, which is what I did when I was in my teens, breaking into banks and the government to find flaws in their security with the same tools that we used as kids.
So let me get this straight. You were a part of an Israeli military unit, and your job was to hack into foreign countries' computer systems. And then when you left the military, you professionally broke into banks.
Yes, so it turns out there's a profession called penetration tester, which is a job that hackers can do legally. You're being hired by banks and by the government and by big companies to try to sneak into their systems and find flaws in their security. And when you find them, instead of just using that, you tell them how it's done. So you tell them, here's a way that a bad hacker can go in, secure that. And this is what I did for many years.
But you actually then, on many occasions, went and robbed the bank physically. Is that right?
Yeah, so part of the job involves not just trying to use remote virtual ways to break into the bank, but also trying to see if there's security flaws in the bank security generally. If they have a camera that doesn't really point to the right place, or if they leave a post-it note with a password. So we try to actually go and rob banks, the old-fashioned way, to show that it's working.
Did anybody with a cape ever try and stop you?
Well, we didn't have people with tights and cape, but we did have the police and the legal systems oftentimes try to, see what's going on in the bank. We would be stopped for a few hours, try to argue that we're doing it legally and we're allowed to, but you imagine that it doesn't really go easily when you're just caught with your hands in the safe box. But it worked out.
So besides, after spending some time in jail, you made a career transition, right?
Yep.
And you decided to repurpose all of your professional hacking skills, and you decided to hack the human brain.
Yeah, so in a twisted but interesting chain of events, kind of like this evening, I met a guy who I listened to, and almost not knowing what I want to do next in my life, got his advice. And it was enough for me to say, this guy has a cool career, maybe I can do that. And this is what ultimately made me leave a pretty successful career in hacking and start over as a neuroscientist. Go to school, study about the brain, and find ways by which knowledge about computers can be helpful to actually study the most interesting thing in the universe, which is us.
So, to bring us back to the idea of superheroes, comic books, all that, there's been huge, huge breakthroughs recently in brain augmentation, the ability to connect things, to affect the brain, and use technology to do it. What are you seeing coming out, and what's going on?
Okay, that's where the cool part starts. Enough about me. So in the last 10 years, neuroscience has spiked with cool things that beforehand were just in science fiction movies. We can now look inside your head and see your true character, but we can also look inside your head and actually change things and make you a better, different, enhanced person. So one of the things that neuroscientists have been working on for a while that I think is pretty incredible is we realized that the parts of you that you come with, what you're born with, is an option. But we can actually increase what Mother Nature gave you and give you more things. You know, if you buy a laptop right now and someone tells you this laptop is going to be yours for the next 80 years, you can't change, you would never sign on this deal. You would say, no, I want to upgrade my laptop every 4 years. But somehow with our body, we accept that whatever we're born with is it. And later, we realize that some of the things we have are kind of falling apart, they're not really functional, we don't really like how they came with. So we now have the tools to actually enhance the human experience and give us more things. Maybe we should show you a video that's going to demonstrate that really, really well. So a colleague of mine from University of Pennsylvania, his name is Andrew Schwartz, Professor Andrew Schwartz. He works with apes, and he basically takes them and enhances slowly their capabilities. So I'm going to show you first a movie of what he does. So if you can roll the ape movie. What you see here is this ape whose right hand was tied in the back, so he can't move his hand, but he tries to reach out for the marshmallow. Now, when he's trying to reach for the marshmallow, his brain thinks the thoughts that would move the arm, but since the arm is tied, the thoughts are translated to a robotic prosthetic arm that actually grabs the marshmallow and feeds his mouth. So what you see here is an ape controlling a robotic arm with his mind so he can eat marshmallows. Now this is cool. I hope you find it cool, as I do. But it actually gets cooler. Because this monkey did this for a few hours. And at first he tried, every time he saw the marshmallow, to grab the marshmallow with his arm, couldn't do it, thought the thoughts that would control the arm and got the marshmallow. But after a few hours, the monkey got tired of trying to even move his own arm, and just gave up. He still thought the thoughts that would move the arm, he just didn't try to move his own organic, biological one. And after a few days of doing that, when Andy unties the monkey's right arm, the one that he would normally use to grab the marshmallow, it's not that the monkey immediately got back to using his own arm to grab the marshmallow. He still got the marshmallow with his thoughts controlling the arm, and now he uses his own biological arm to scratch his head. So essentially, in the course of a few days, this ape gained a third arm. He has 2 arms that he came with, that he can control, and his brain allocated more resources to controlling a robotic arm, so he can do things that he couldn't do before. This ape, in 1 week, got 1 more prosthetic control over an arm that he didn't have before. And this is not just to work for monkeys or apes. It could be any of you. We now have the ability to, in a very short time, train your brain to learn how to control more things. And if you don't believe me, you're taking science fiction, I'm going to show you something that we did recently in a lab. So if you can roll the second film, in this one, you will see a drummer that we put an EEG on his head and train him to quickly learn how to think thoughts that would move the arm and drum on a third drum. All right.
So this is absolutely incredible. We're seeing a scenario where somebody is controlling an external limb purely by their thoughts. And I remember when we were talking about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, in general, the human brain is really great at taking inputs, like a signal from a machine, and giving outputs, and it doesn't really care what it's connected to. Is that right?
Right. The main learning of the last 10 years in neuroscience is that the brain that sits in your head doesn't really see the world. It doesn't really smell or hear or sense the world. It sits in a dark place, kind of cool, full of water around it, and all it knows about the world, all that you call your experience, is something that your sensors deliver into your brain. So what your eyes can translate from the photons in the space into the brain signal is what you call what you see. What your nose can turn from molecular vibrations into the language of your brain is what you smell. And now we know that we can actually change that. We can make your brain see things that are not there. We can make your nose experience more things that are not really available to you right now, and we can actually enhance your experience of life.
Could you make vegetables taste like chocolate?
Essentially, yes. So this is a thing that scientists are looking at right now.
That'd be amazing.
It's called decoupling, where we basically say the experience of eating isn't eating. So there's one study that's pretty remarkable where a scientist, a colleague of mine in France, took people and put a little tube inside their throat and just fed them food without them chewing. And what happens there is that you get the entire nutrients, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. You just feel full without any joy. Then it did the opposite. You had people chew food, and once you swallow it, it comes out right away. And then you feel all the joy of eating without getting nutrients, so you don't feel full. And right now we're playing with a mix of that. What food does your body need in order to feel good? What food does your brain need in order to feel like you've eaten? And how can we separate the two? And in many ways, we can now start thinking about health in different approach. Instead of like saying, okay, I'm hungry, let's eat whatever is next to me, like whatever is outside here, all kinds of junk food, you can actually say, give me salad, but make my brain experience it as like the chocolate cake that's out there. This decoupling of the experience from the process of eating can make us all eat healthier while enjoying the things that our brain likes, which is sugar and fatty stuff.
So when we talk about cybernetics or limbs and so on, often the example of people who got hurt in accidents or came back from war zones come up. What are we seeing? I know for a while there was a discussion of something called the Luke arm, which was a cybernetic arm that you could give people who lost as a prosthetic. But what's the new technologies? What's going on?
So when it comes to people who have all kinds of problems coming back from war, for instance, there's a variety of things we want to deal with. So one of them is the body, and one of them is the brain. A body is one thing that we actually know better how to change. The brain, we're not as good, and that's where the problems that many of us are going to experience come in the future. So body-wise, soldiers come back, maybe they lost their limbs at war. We know how the brain controls the limbs. We can actually put a prosthetic arm where their limbs used to be, connect those straight to their brain using wireless connection or using wiring, and retrain the body in a rapid experience to actually control this arm the same way they control their body. This means that once we get to perfection, which we're still far from because the signal is pretty noisy and we don't really know how to do the wiring, the plastic surgery of it is really hard for us at this stage, but the neuroscience of it is actually something that we do better job at. Once we figure out the entire wiring, we can actually basically take every person who lost a connection and fix that, overriding the spinal cord. That's body. Brain-wise, we know that a lot of times your experiences at war or your experience in life leave marks on you. And those marks might be there and affect your life in the form of post-traumatic stress that you don't know how to cope with, especially if it happens in a younger age. Right now, we're realizing that we can even change that. So your memories are not fixed. They're malleable, and they change over time. And now we gradually learn even how to change your memories. So your experiences of life would be such that you can still remember things that happened to you, even the bad things, but not relive them time and again.
Now, let's get into the stuff that we really want to talk about because we're here at Comic-Con. How soon am I going to be able to get superpowers by connecting machines to my brain?
So depends on how you define superpowers. If superpowers are flying and, then we're pretty far still. We know the mechanics of wings, we know the mechanics of air and the pressure, but it's still kind of far, mostly because of ethical reasons and legal reasons, from us being able to actually connect wings to your brain. However, there are some superpowers that we already have right now that are amazing. So first of all, let me do the lame answer from scientists. Whatever you see right now as reality is superpowers for people 10 years ago. So a phone that can connect to other phones speedily and give you all the information about the world was magic when I was a kid your age. Which means that when you're going to be my age, 20 years from now, everything that seems like magic to you might be part of your reality if you just left this room and said, I'm going to go work on it. So the more of you do that, the faster we're going to get there. So that's the kind of lame scientific answer. The coolest thing is that we can actually do a lot of things that seem still like science fiction, and I still see them in comic books back behind me. And we can do them right now. So a few years ago, a colleague of mine, Miguel Nicolelis, is a Brazilian neuroscientist who works at Duke in North Carolina and in Rio de Janeiro. He was the first guy to teach two mice, a mouse in Brazil and a mouse in North Carolina, to speak telepathically. He read the brain of mouse, sent the connection over the internet to another mouse, and the mouse in Rio de Janeiro presses a button that another mouse made it think he wants to press. That's ESP. I saw it in a comic book 5 minutes ago. Now it's offered as a service if you just go to Duke to get your undergrad there, or if you go to Rio de Janeiro to get your undergrad there. So here's one place to start.
Now, if I'm not a mouse, which I don't think I am.
Overgrown mouse.
I'm an overgrown mouse. From what I understand, there's actually currently living 500,000 cyborgs in our society.
So one of the things that I looked at before talking to you guys was how many people in the world right now currently have something inside their head that helps them think thoughts differently. So we talk about science fiction in the sense of one day we're going to plug a chip inside your head that's going to download your thoughts or be able to remember things from you that you cannot remember yourself. And those are still things that we don't have right now, again, because of mostly ethical and legal reasons. We don't really have the ability to do it mechanically, but we are slowed down mostly by the fact that it's just not right to put stuff in people's brain without knowing exactly what the after effects would be. But there's about 500,000 people in the world who have problems in their brain where the chip is a way for them to actually be better. Those are people with epilepsy, and you want this chip in their brain to actually stop them from having seizures. People with Parkinson's, that you want their chip to actually regulate the movement of their body. People with all kinds of levels of molecular inefficiencies, like depression, in a way, that you want to help them. Those people right now have a chip inside their brain that controls their thoughts. Now, it doesn't really make them do things that are abnormal in that sense, but imagine that you have one thought that's bothering you all the time, and we can zap it and make you not feel the same feelings. That's something that these guys can already have. I told John earlier, I have a colleague, a professor in Germany, who built his own device that allows him to actually control his body with his thoughts in a way that, again, would be like cyborgs for you guys. So this guy was born, his name is Professor Bertolt Meyer. He was born without his left hand. So he has a disease that made his left hand not develop properly. In the course of his life, he developed his own prosthetic hand that he can attach to his arm. And he has this hand that he can control not only just with his thoughts and make it move around, but also an app that he built that he can give to anyone in the room, and he can say, you now control my hand, so I'm going to focus on doing things with my right arm, and you make my left hand actually do some things on the back. As long as I don't have to think about it, you can control it. So you can outsource his body to you. And he can do all kinds of things that you cannot even do yourself. Like he can say, I want to put a light bulb in one movement. So you can just put it and the hand will move. Or you can think thoughts that you cannot think, because he has to think about whether did I leave my arm working, or is it okay now? All of those thoughts that you don't even have, he has to think about in his mind. And this is the reality that you all get to experience in a little while if you start connecting your body to things out there.
I have to say, I think it's absolutely incredible because many of us may have actually had experiences of what cybernetics might be like, and that's specifically in VR, right? When you have visual input, and have you guys experienced VR? When you experience visual input, your brain responds as if it's real to a stunning degree. And we actually have a video that I think everybody would really enjoy of how much the body takes seriously being in a VR environment. What we're about to see is a video of a man experiencing a VR roller coaster. And if you could cue that up, it's the third video. And you see his friend just pushed him. But what's incredible is that his brain couldn't differentiate between the virtual environment that was being presented to him. And when his friend pushed him while he was going down the roller coaster, he thought he was going to die and freaked out.
What's amazing here is that this man is now forever changed. So we, across many, many generations of evolution, learned that being on a top place, looking down, is scary. Because those of us who actually stepped down didn't make it through evolution. So all of us are descendant of people who didn't make this one more step extra and fell. And that's why we know when we were born to not be next to high places. Now, VR allows you to not only be next to a high place and sit, but actually take this one step and not die. Which means that it retrains your brain to not be scared of something that thousands of years of evolution taught you is bad for you. Which means that each and every one of you, if you play this little game of trying to step away, are changing your brain, and from then on, you won't experience the same fear ever again. It will decay over time. So this guy was very scared the first time, he won't be as much the second time, he won't be as much the third, and at some point, he's going to change his brain, and presumably, he could even start passing that to other generations who actually will be born without the fear of heights. Now, this, of course, is great that we can eliminate some fears, but also risky because most fears came to us because of bad things in the world. So now we're playing this God thing where we can change the brain, and in doing so, really expose our bodies to things that are beyond what nature suggested in the first place.
That's incredible. So let's talk about what we can do cybernetically, right? We've discussed body augmentation before, and you talked about how we've come to a society where it's acceptable to switch out your teeth and have nice veneers, and you'll look beautiful. You can change your body, have fat sucked out, and that's acceptable. But we're going to be facing a bigger issue coming up, aren't we?
Yes, so the main kind of leap that we're right now looking into, and it's kind of controversial, so you can pick a side yourself, is the idea of augmenting our thinking using digital chips inside our head the same way you use your phone. So right now, if I ask you to memorize a 10-digit phone number, you won't actually memorize the digits. You just put it in your phone, press save, and you're going to be safe because it's somewhere in your phone. This wasn't an option when I was a kid. You had to memorize your friends' phone numbers. Same with navigation. If you navigated here using a car, most likely you put it in a GPS and you had some device tell you how to get here. None of you looked at a map and actually memorized the directions. And this means we are more and more putting our thoughts in machines. Now, right now, those machines are outside. They're handheld and we look at them and they're interacting with us. But there's no reason why we can't put those machines inside our head and outsource them into different thinking. So right now, you're all breathing, which means that part of your brain tells another part of your brain, control the breathing and just make it happen. I don't want to know about it. I want it to happen automatically without me thinking. But somewhere in your brain, there is a process that actually controls your breathing all the time. If I ask you to do the calculation for 5 plus 7, you don't really say, let me outsource that to the frontal lobe, get the answer, and then come back and say, okay, now I know the answer. It just happens automatically, which means that your brain knows how to outsource to different sites in it the calculations it needs to do. Right now, we're thinking that if you can put a chip inside your brain, say where your memory is, you can just say, here's a number you have to remember, and you're going to just say, okay, let me think for a second, the thought that would make it move to the digital chip, and I'm just going to register it there, and then it's available to you using a chip inside your head. And again, if you believe that already there's 500,000 people who have a chip inside their head that already works, we can now enhance this chip with one more thing, which is memories. We can add that, control over emotions, regulating of things in your body that you don't regulate yourself, like feeling hungry or full, or even waking up in the morning. Instead of using an alarm clock that's going to wake you up externally, you're going to have something in your brain make you just wake up on time feeling awake, because we can control your experience of wakefulness. Now, this is really useful for people who wake up to school early morning and don't want to do that. Suddenly, you're going to wake up on time, on your own, even wanting to be awake. How cool is that?
I could definitely use that. So, in light of all this, and since there's so many of the people from the Justice League here, and we're talking about cybernetics, maybe we should have a conversation about our favorite cybernetic being. Do you guys like Cyborg? Should we bring Cyborg onto the stage? Fine, here he is. So, in the movie, I like the Oz. In the movie Justice League, we come across a character played by Ray Fisher called Cyborg, who's enhanced by machine. How soon are we going to be able to, or what of his augmentations do you currently see us being able to have? So clearly you already mentioned the arms, right? Could I have bionic legs and run around and be 100 times faster than everybody?
So limbs we can do right now. We can already attach them with people who have lost them, and we can want to recover them. Of course, there's a lot of things inside your body that we've been replacing for years. So heart transplants has been with us for now over a few decades. We can actually take people's heart and replace them. There's a few people who are working with cochlear implants, which means that their ears didn't work well, and we now can plug ear that replaces their eardrum and essentially translates molecular vibrations into the language of the brain, and they can just hear. There's a few clinical trials of retinal implants. Those are people that basically were born blind, and we put device inside their eyes that would make them see. And I'm not really an expert in the Bible, but if I'm correctly remembering, the last guy to give sight to the blind was Jesus about 2,000 years ago, and he was declared God after doing that. So I think that we're playing a little bit in this realm. We can also replace senses, so we can actually make your tongue feel things or your ears smell things or kind of rewire your brain. I think of other cool things that we're playing with right now. We can, of course, inject things into your head so you can actually see things that are not there, so we can actually change your reality, and we play with...
If memory serves, you can actually inject night vision into people's eyes now.
Inject night vision, like we can make people see like snakes. So snakes actually see the world infrared. So a snake wouldn't really see you guys. It would just see heat maps all over the place. So we can take the eyes of the snake, which are really remarkable, and essentially plug them into your brain so you start seeing like a snake. We can also speed up your processing. So right now, humans see in some kind of a frame rate that's pretty slow. We can actually speed up the processing of that. That's not healthy for you long term, but we can speed up your clock. We can also, there's a clinical trial right now that try to make colorblind people see colors. And what's remarkable is that most people in this room see what's called tricolors. So we basically see 3 wavelengths, so that's what you call reality. But there's a few people in the world, mostly women, who actually have another color receptor that you don't have. So it might be that there's one woman in this room that can actually see more of the world than all of you experience right now. And we can now take people that are mostly men that have only 2 and give them a 3rd one, basically change their roads in their eye and make them see. So color blindness might be something that we can take over entirely. And essentially take over all the things that are small in the sensory devices, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and fix those.
So when the brain comes in contact with some kind of stimuli, or you're making a decision, your conscious mind doesn't make all the choices immediately, right? It actually outsources to different subsections of the brain. As far as I understand it, people in general think that the brain is this unified object that just makes a decision and moves forward. But it's more that different pieces do different parts, and then they fight for dominance. Is that right?
They're both a competition inside your head at any given moment on what is reality, that each part suggests a different one, and the average of all of them is what we call reality. We also know that there are some things that you just don't see, but they're happening. So right now, for instance, all of you see the world in color. It's a color for all of you. But when it started in your brain, it was in black and white. There's a part of your brain that kind of added color later on. So for the first 20 milliseconds of your seeing, the world's in black and white, and then something adds color to it. And now we can actually touch this part of the brain and turn it off so you can suddenly see the world in black and white for a second. Not recommended, but we can play with that. And when you hit someone's back of the brain with a baseball bat, he actually sees stars. This is not really in cartoons, it's actually in real, because we hit the same part that makes the brain creates visuals that are not there. More than that, we know that most of the experience of life is actually internal, and what the eyes, the ears, the nose add are just modifications. So right now, your brain already creates the entire experience of the world, and your eyes add a little bit more information that then you attach and you change that. So in many ways, if you close your eyes for a while and you just listen to your inside voice, you will actually see things that your brain creates that are not there. This is mostly done with the prisoners who are put in solitary confinement for a while and they get no stimuli. What happens quickly is that their brain starts creating an entire world around them. And this is a property of your brain. It creates the world.
When we're making a decision, we give the information for processing to a different section of the brain, right? So I outsource, my conscious thinking outsources, do this mathematical calculation. But soon we'll be able to, if we have these chips, outsource kind of crazy tasks. Is that right?
Yeah. So the crazy things we can do is we can take things that we think are impossible for a machine to process and have the machine do that. So for example, right now I spoke about changing small things in the sense that they're things that we understand. But as we get to the world of AI, we can have a computer look at all of our life and see what things we tend to like but don't even know that we like, and have the computer just suggest that we would like to do them. So we would just suddenly wake up in the morning and feel like we really want to eat something that we don't know that our body needs, but the chip would say, looking at your nutrients, you're missing this B12 molecule, I'm going to suggest that, and I'm going to make it in the form that you're going to just feel like you want to have a steak right now. And when you go to AI, what's amazing about them is that they can really do things that we don't see ahead of time. So we're going to have a video right now that we picked from a clip online that shows a Tesla car. This Tesla car is driven by a human. The human drives it. And what you see is that as the car drives, you suddenly hear a beeping sound. This sound is the Tesla AI engine realizing that the trouble is ahead, way before it happens, way before all the humans in the scenario realize it's happening, and it still alerts us about something terrible is going to happen. So I'm suggesting that if you brace yourself for like a pretty difficult movie, but I think it's remarkable to see what would the AI do for us if we just let it think for us. So this pretty remarkable video.
Yeah. We're good.
Was that? Did you see it? Well, this remarkable video is just outside machine thinking seconds before us and realizing something is going to be not okay. Now imagine it's in your head and it just tells you something that's going to happen that you don't like. Avoid it right now. Change your actions. Maybe don't press this button. Maybe don't go on this elevator. All of those things that machines can do for us with all information just turns into a feeling in our head.
So I want to open this up a little to the audience and see if anybody has any questions, and see if you guys are curious about anything. Is anybody want to know anything about how we could augment you or give you superpowers? Or what superpowers would you like to have?
Should we?
Oh, okay. Since the question's probably to you, I'm going to... What's your name?
Alex, would you be able to like give like powers like Spider-Man, like insects or something? Would there be like anything like that?
So, are we going to be able to give people powers like Spider-Man?
Okay, so let's talk about Spider-Man. So, what powers of his do you like? So he can, has spider webs. Is also a pretty smart kid that can kind of outsmart a lot of the villains. And I think the focus on the superpowers, of course, is pretty cool because, he can do things that... But if you think about it, if I just gave you spider webs right now, there's a lot of things you still cannot do. And I think that one of the things that the superpowers gave him is the ability to also, use his smarts to do things. And I think that if you kind of look at the movie with me, step by step, frame by frame, you will see that most of the things that he does are just him being a smart kid. And I hope you see where I'm going with that. That those superpowers, he has spider webs, and if you let it play a little longer, you're going to find that the villain has better spider webs, and he can find against that. All of the history of technology shows that whatever smart tools you build, someone can build even smarter tools and do even more complex things. But the only thing that kind of consistently wins you thing is actually just having smart brains. So you asked me about spider webs. We know how to build spider webs. We know how the spiders actually build their webs, and that's remarkable how the spider does that. We also know how the systematic ways the spider builds its web are helpful for spiders.
But I'm going to interrupt here for a second. So the answer is there's two different ways we can tackle this issue, okay? One is we could either give you like an exosuit, right? So the new Spider-Man that we see has this exosuit that's kind of like a Iron Man suit. The problem with that is that it just requires so much energy, it doesn't really make sense to carry a human being inside, and we are probably better off just having a robot that we control with our brain go do everything for us, right? Does that make sense? The second option, neither of us are experts at, there's a technology now called CRISPR. CRISPR allows you to edit your genetics, right? So in the storyline of Spider-Man, he's always bitten by a radioactive spider. And that spider somehow changes his genetics to give him, 4 different skills. He gets spidey senses, he gets super strength, he gets the knowledge how to make the webs, and he gets the ability to stick to surfaces. So here's what we can do. We can maybe look at the skill of geckos have this kind of glue that they produce, and I think we figured out how it works. We might be able to do the sticking thing, right? The super strength, you can maybe do an exoskeleton or suit, or there are people who have just their muscles are much, much stronger, and we can maybe just change your genetics so that you become much, much stronger. There's also people who are what's called, I think they're called super breathers. There's virtually no difference between us and them, except they could be standing on the top of Mount Everest and doing backflips and breathing normally, whereas we would die within like an hour or two. I don't even remember what the numbers are like. So the answer is, probably by the time you're our age, we might be able to augment your body with this stuff. Now, is it safe? I don't know if you want to be part spider. I don't know if that would also change who you'd want to marry. Maybe you'd only want to marry other people who are part spiders and have kids with them. But I think that by the time you're our age, it might be a possibility.
Especially if you go help us.
Yes. So if you want to work at Moran's lab, let us know. Next question. Anyone? There's a microphone right there. Please come up and we'll be happy to answer. Make it a tough one.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Good question.
Yeah. I was wondering, what's the possibility of changing someone's voice? I mean, in terms of vocal range for singers, or maybe something like the Black Canary.
Oh, yeah. So just to give Moran an update, Black Canary is a character from the DC universe who has a voice that shrieks so loud it can shatter glass, knock people out, and so on. So I think that there's two basic questions around that. One is, I think the biggest issue with most superpowers is an issue of energy, right? So for Cyclops, his eyes to beam that much energy, the body needs to be releasing that much energy, and we don't know where it would come from. And so we'd have to find some kind of reaction in the body to produce that much energy. Then the second is fortifying the vocal cords.
Or the range, like
yeah.
how high or low a voice can go.
And maybe Moran can speak to this. My hunch is we're probably better off with a technological solution for that than genetically changing the body.
First of all, you have an amazing voice.
Thank you.
Like commanding the room. So there's one opera singer that I'm close with who had a particular problem with her voice. She lost the ability to actually use her vocal cords, and she went to a procedure that's pretty complex, but she now is an opera singer just like she was before, plus an enhanced kind of spectrum. So we can play with that. And that's offered to many, many singers who actually really ruin their vocal cords over time. We can now fix that. We know how to play with that, and that's not neuroscience anymore, but it's a procedure that we know how to play with. So that's one thing. Now, I think that superhero voices are, the sounds that are outside of our spectrum. So humans evolved, kind of co-evolved the vocal cords with their eardrums such that we kind of hear and produce the same sounds. Like you can't produce a sound that you cannot hear, and you cannot hear sounds that are not in the spectrum of your voice. So in many ways, there's kind of a feedback that our ears and the question that you might want to ask is, can we produce sounds that we can't hear? There are tools right now that do that. So there's whistles you can buy that actually you blow it, you hear nothing, but a dog would start barking because it plays into their kind of spectrum. And it's used by the police, it's used by a lot of villains in our real world to actually communicate. It's used also by technology. There's some phone systems that use different frequencies to actually communicate, and they don't kind of activate your brain. So in that sense, we can do a lot of like machinery. I think that if you ask about specific clinical thing, because your sister, your brother, your friend has that, talk to me afterwards.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yes. Oh, come on up.
Hi.
Hi.
How would Green Lantern use his ring to generate different things?
That's a great question.
So we have the equation here. I'm going to give it to you. You tell me about that.
No. Okay, so do you know who Green Lantern is?
Of course.
I have so much doubt. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, there's this group called the Lantern Corps. The Lantern Corps is from the planet Oa, is that right? And they have a group called the Guardians, and they have these rings. And the rings find people or different species that represent essentially the best that their society has to offer, and they become protectors. But what's unique is that the ring allows them to form energy in fields and then do stuff with it. So the Green Lantern can make something look like a giant fist and punch somebody, or he could make something look like or he could physically scan space and see, okay, there were footprints here previously.
Is that correct? That's a.
Did I give the right description?
That's the ring you want?
Well, I asked the question.
Yeah.
I meant, is the description correct? Like, is that the ring? You want a ring that will help you
Do that.
connect to your friends and to help you see things that are not there?
Well,
make
as
shapes.
long as you don't take advantage of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is tough. So let's think what we know right now.
We'd need a way to make fields, like force fields, right, in space. I don't think we can do that now.
So okay, let's take the
You
easy
picked a
part. First of
really good one.
Communication we can do. So we have now a lot of rings that actually can communicate with other devices. Forget about rings. We have devices. It could be in the form of a ring. It could be a bracelet. It could be anything that you carry that communicates with others. You probably know phones, right? You can have phones. So communication is easy. So that's something that we solve. It takes very, very little size to put something that you can actually wear on you that will speak to other things. So that's covered.
Moran, I think the bigger issue is the answer is I don't think we can do it. I think it's going to. Here's what we need. Okay. You seem like an inquisitive, smart kid. We need kids like you to go into the sciences and to study and help figure out how we can do this as a society. So that way we can have real Green Lanterns that will help protect us and do good in the world.
That would be great.
I know.
And come talk to us afterwards because I think I'm not done. I have more ideas for you. Come
All right.
afterwards.
Thank you very much for the
Thank
question.
you.
Yeah, please hop on.
How you guys doing? Quick question. Basically, there's been a lot of sci-fi regarding this, but how close are we to downloading our consciousness? So we are, basically it's almost the question of living forever. Like your body perishes, but you'll be able to communicate. Something like
Like any movie.
Futurama, where you have the heads
Yes.
that are able to speak and
Absolutely.
maintain consciousness.
That's a great last question, I think. It allows me to use the quote that I was thinking about before I came here, and it allows me to talk about the most, I think, interesting things in the world. So, when I was a kid, 12, I grew up on movies like Star Trek and Star Wars, and I read comic books, and I was fascinated by things that 25 years later are now part of my day-to-day work in the lab. That's what we do. And all of those ideas that inspired me when I was just looking at comic books are mostly part of reality. The quote that I thought about before coming here is that the difference between science fiction and science is mostly just the timing. You wait enough and everything becomes reality. So those things that you buy right now in your books, and you just say, when will I have this ring that will summon and conjure entities out there, and we kind of laugh and we say, I don't know, if you just go play, it's going to become a reality. Consciousness was one of those things for me. So I was reading books of consciousness, and I was thinking, okay, this is remarkable, and when will we ever be able to download thoughts? We do it right now. So we have a number of people, few, in clinical trials, and mostly animals in labs that actually have their thoughts downloaded entirely to machines and uploaded to different animals, so we can do that entirely. Consciousness is a really big word. It has experiences, it has our desires, our intentions, our emotions, our dreams. There's a lot of things, and actually it's a little bit hard for scientists to work with this word because it's so vague. But if you break it down to mechanics, we have a few things that we thought are impossible that we can now do. One of them is involving your memories. In my lab, we have studies that involve taking people who recently died and see what information is still in their brain after they're no longer there that you can actually take out. Now, this means that content in your brain is available after you're not there, which actually asks the question, what is you? Who is not there if your brain is still there and thoughts are still active and we can extract them? The next step that we're thinking about is if we can extract them, can we record them and can we give them to someone else? And that's essentially what I think is the experience that you all ask about. can I live forever? Can my existence go on after me? And is there something that is eternal that we can capture? And the answer is that scientists are all about this question because it was what we cared about when we were kids and care about as adults. And for the first time in history, we have the tools to start actually toying with that and seeing how we can change that.
Thank you.
So I think you're there.
I think,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you guys. Thank you
Pleasure.
very much for your time and your attention. And thanks for a great last question. And Moran, if people want to hear more about your work, where can they find you?
If you want to hear about work, you can find me. I'm the easiest guy to find. If you just type my name, you'll find my website. But there's more than that, and maybe that's the last thing. There are scientists within 2 miles from every place you live that are eager to kind of talk to you about their work. They are eager to tell you about cool stuff that they do, and they're mostly looking for people to kind of work with. So if you start right now, if you find this cool, and if you say, I want to do that, you should kind of find your way into a place where scientists sit and be part of them. I hope you're going to do that. Thank you, guys.